Hi, Chris Duff over at Serious Land Capital, vacant land funding partner. Today, I wanted to recap some of the key lessons that we've learned about development projects, primarily from the one that we've worked on in Louisiana over the past few months. So I know I've covered a lot of these topics, probably more piecemeal, but I wanted to provide at least a basic summary of where we're at now and how we would approach development projects differently or have different expectations coming into it. Overall, I'm feeling very positive about it. It's been more work than expected, but in terms of what we anticipate the total exit to be, I think we're tracking really well here. So the first item is that we should just expect development to take much longer than anything that was originally quoted to us. So, when we purchased this property, I think it was back in mid March, approximately. And just to recap, for those of you who aren't familiar, this was a roughly 32 acre uh, land property in central Louisiana. We chopped it up into roughly three equal child parcels. One was a flag lot, so 10 to 11 acres each. And we were expecting the parish approval, by the way, parish equals county within the state of Louisiana, to take maybe a month or so, and the anticipated development where we were going to be carving out home sites and installing nice driveways for all three of the child parcels, basically making it as turnkey as possible for an eventual end buyer, where all they would need to do is lay down a foundation and hook up utilities with public water and electricity available at the street to make it, basically, again, as turnkey as possible for them to have quick and easy setup. Plus, all of the home sites within the child parcels would be private to the street and to each other, because there was just enough room on all of those parcels to be able to do that. And so that was the overall goal. And we thought that whole process, based on some initial estimates from a developer we had reached out to, or at least a contractor moving dirt and installing driveways, is going to be maybe a 2 week project. So we thought, okay, conservatively, getting the parish approval is going to take maybe a month. And that was, first we needed to get a survey done. That was maybe going to take a few days, ended up taking like a week or so. Then get the parish approval might take a month, and then another couple weeks to knock out all of the value add, and then we could list. And we were targeting probably listing by mid to late May. Probably late May was the initial estimate, which is like key, best possible timing for that particular market. And so, sub 2 months for us to actually get things fully out there. Well, like I mentioned again, survey probably took a little bit longer to get done, and parish approval was actually way faster. It took a week approximately. And so we thought, okay, hey, we just gained a whole bunch of time here. But then, when we went back to the contractors, the first one who had looked at it, their hard quote changed significantly. They came back as more expensive than what they had quoted before. And, I was understanding of their situation because they didn't have a child parcel survey yet. So once we actually had the hard data, wherever the flags were and so forth, they could assess it more realistically. So then we had to go back with a quote process with other contractors to try to get a better deal. And we did find one who could also start work a little bit earlier. But that's another thing too, is like, a lot of these contractors are busy depending on what area of the country that you're in. So, you don't want to commit or throw a deposit down on something until you have full approval for your plan from the county or the parish or whatever. So you might have some lag time that no work is getting done. And then we were quoted, okay, it's going to take 2 weeks just to get the clearing out of the way, but not even, the driveway wash rock that they were going to put down. And so like, okay, this might take a little bit longer than we thought. But again, luckily we had some buffer time time to work with. And so they were quoting, okay, it's going to take 2 weeks just to clear. And 2 weeks passed, and now we are 3 weeks deep into the project, and it's still not done. It's almost done, but there were multiple rainouts. It's wet season in central Louisiana. Even these guys were working any day they could, including Saturdays and Sundays. But you just had to account for that. Plus, there were just complications that came up during the actual clear out that required more time and adjustments just based on the underlying terrain. Which again, I'm ignorant as far as how we should have expected that, because I just don't do on-site work myself. But understanding that, okay, once you actually dive into a project, just like anything else, inevitably things come up. So that's going to be the same thing with development, especially when you're outside and beholden to the elements. Some things are just going to get delayed there, and so we still don't have a final quote on timeline as well as final cost on the actual gravel installation for the driveways. So I'm still not sure what that's going to take, but that could be another couple weeks, maybe a little bit more. And so at this point, it's probably going to take like 3 times as long for the total development project as what we were initially expecting on the deals. Just going forward for future developments, which again we plan on doing again. We're just gonna include a much longer buffer time for what we're initially quoted, just expecting possible weather delays and complications that just happen during the project. If we underestimate or overestimate how long it's going to take, fine, that's rosy. But I'd rather the fact that it's like 3x as long as we thought, and we might not even hit our original listing date that we thought we were going to do from the start is definitely something that we weren't expecting, even though the parish approval was like 1/4 as long as how conservatively what we had booked for that. So that's what we would adjust from that side. And then the cost as well, I would just instead going forward, I would have even higher buffer range for overage, just because we're figuring out again, like things may just come up during the course of development that might, like for instance, on the flag lot, they needed to, add extra dirt in to ensure the, long-term durability of the driveway back to the home site. And if they weren't able to collect enough dirt from the other child parcels, they were going to have to bring in 2 extra truckloads of dirt, which is going to cost an extra $8,000. And it's like, okay, we could just say no to that, but then you're basically required to do that because, like, okay, are you going to, present a shoddy parcel to the market? No, we have to like maximize values. It's important to ultimately keep that in mind and be able to adjust as needed based on the actual terrain that comes up. Or same thing with the 3rd child parcel. Once the realtor and the contractor were actually on it, they're like, okay, we should extend this home site a little bit further back, do a little extra clearing. It's going to be way more appealing visually for an end buyer. It's going to cost another few grand to do that. And they're like, okay, if it's nominal cost relatively like that, fine, let's do it. Again, we're trying to maximize value here, but just being, understanding of it's probably harder to get fully hard quotes on a development project right from the start, especially on raw land. And so even if we're getting, a rough quote and then we're including an overage, I'd probably even double that buffer. I'd probably include like 20-25% buffer on already what we think the high end is going to be for that particular project. And when it comes back lower, great, we can just return capital if other investors are in. Once everything's committed, it's fine. But I'd rather have extra buffer and not have to scramble for additional cash if it turns out it's going to be advantageous or just, other complications come up during that. And then the additional piece here is just there was a lot more complexity in day-to-day decision making in this development project than we thought. Again, we thought this was, relatively simple, right? It's like three child parcels. All we're doing is carving out a driveway, basically a home site, and on relatively flat land. So there's heavier vegetation, but it's not like we're blowing dynamite into a mountain or installing like a full sewer system or something like that. I thought it was going to be relatively simple, but again, once the development actually started, it just required additional decision making. Like, okay, do we need a clear out this extra little area to make it more beautiful, or again, we might need to adjust the amount of dirt that needs to come in here, and hopefully we can avoid that $8,000 costs or not. But we have to be ready to handle that as needed. Plus, we needed to add a deeded easement onto the middle child parcel to avoid a much larger fee from more difficult terrain near the entrance of the flag lot. So the driveway ultimately needed to exit onto the middle child parcel and then wind its way back onto the flag lot to more naturally fit the terrain and avoid like a much more significant dirt work expense, probably like 20 grand or more. So all that stuff we just, didn't have an understanding with until the development actually started, and you just have to be adaptable and able to handle this. And, again, very fortunately, we have a local expert, boots on the ground realtor who is, working, he's out there almost every day, basically being a project manager for us. And again, this is just a reminder for, hey, if you're going to be doing a development project and you're not available to be boots on the ground, even if I was, like, I don't necessarily have that expertise to figure it out. Like, I understand how to price land underwrite, but the actual moving dirt around process, like it's in another skill set entirely. So I appreciate having somebody who has handled projects like this before and understands what to look for and can like quickly educate us on what the best decision might be to go ahead there. But again, even if I was available physically to be out there every day, I'm almost positive I would not be able to do a better job than the realtor who's out there, has a lot of experience with these projects, making sure that we're, not getting charged and too much extra or getting gouged and so forth. He's managing the project very effectively. So having a real solid boots on the ground person. And again, this isn't like a super complicated development project. So imagine if you're doing, a 10 plus lot setup and a whole bunch of value add, like you're really, really going to want to make sure you have the right people in place before you ever agree to move forward with something. So there's the primary lessons that we've learned recently from a development side. Again, getting much more comfortable with this, and I plan to do a lot more of this over the coming years and decades here. It's questionable whether we'll do like the massive major subdivides. I don't know just yet, or do we try to just prep paper lots, or maybe some horizontal development and so forth. But there's just a lot to it. A lot of moving parts, various personalities and skill sets and so forth. That's what I'm just like reminded sometimes. You see other larger developments going on. Even living here in Austin, where we have nice weather basically year round, where people, contractors, construction workers can be out all months of the year, and still things just seem to take forever. Like there's this sewer installation / road widening project near where I live that has just seemed to take like 2+ years. And I pass by it every day. I'm like, what is going on here? I don't understand how this isn't done, or why it can't move faster. And whenever I see people like, I'm not able to put all the pieces together to figure out what is going on. I'm sure I'm missing tons of context there. And maybe there's other red tape and so forth going on, but it's like, some of this stuff just takes way longer than you would think. Or, again, some like the northern climates, like I used to live near Chicago and back, then they're closed off for sometimes 4 or 5 months of the year, just because it's, frigid and ground is frozen. And so all this, the projects are just put on pause to just, started to appreciate, okay, stuff just is probably going to take longer than expected. These guys all, work really, really hard for the most part. Again, they're usually out there possibly 7 days a week, just trying to avoid weather delays and so forth. Or like the neighborhood that I'm in, these guys out in the hot sun, just 6:30 a.m. to like 7 p.m. sometimes, just grinding to build houses and develop. Like I admire the work ethic. Not something I would want to be doing personally, but that's what it takes to get a lot of these physical projects done. So I'm appreciating us being able to handle more of the oversight of that, but it is a beast to start working in developments. Hopefully this is all helpful to you as you might tackle some of these projects. I know this is a bit of a recap for other stuff I've commented on recently. I just wanted to summarize for you all, as well as myself, going forward here. And with that in mind, seriousland.capital for any of your funding needs. And Land Daily Diligence Facebook group, zero cost review of your land deals and landpricer.ai for the most simple and accurate way to price land. To snag one of the last tickets available, $200 off your ticket if you use my last name as a promo code. Really hope to see you there. It is less than 3 months away. Only large land conference I'm going to this year. Very much looking forward to it. Subscribe and share. Take care. See you next time. Bye.